She had no medals, no records, but a 4-star general showed up at her grave and told me to fly to Geneva. My grandmother never talked about the war. Not once. Not even when I begged her as a little girl, tugging at the sleeve of her worn cotton dress, asking why she walked with a slight limp, why she sometimes stared at nothing for minutes at a time, why she kept a small locked box under her bed that no one was ever allowed to touch. She would just smile, that tired, beautiful smile, and say, "Some stories are too heavy for little ears, Sarah." My name is Sarah Richard, and I thought I knew my grandmother. I was wrong. The woman nobody remembered asterisk. Eleanor Richard served as an army nurse during one of the most classified operations in Cold War history. At least, that's what I know now. Back then, back when she was alive, she was just Grandma. The woman who made cornbread from scratch, who hummed old hymns while hanging laundry, who pressed wildflowers between the pages of a Bible she read every single morning without fail. She never owned a home. She rented a small 2-room apartment in rural Kentucky for 43 years, paying cash every month, never owning a credit card, never filing for veterans' benefits, never once contacting the Department of Defense. We thought she was just private. We had no idea she was hiding. When she died at 81, there was no obituary, no funeral announcement. She had specifically requested, in a handwritten note left on her kitchen table, that there be no public notice of her passing, just a quiet burial, just family. Except I was the only family left. My parents died in a car accident when I was 19. My uncle passed from cancer 3 years later. It had been just Grandma and me against the world for more than a decade. And now it was just me. I arranged everything myself. The casket, the burial plot at Arlington, something she had quietly qualified for, though I didn't fully understand why at the time. The military had approved the request within 24 hours, which struck me as strange. Most Arlington applications took weeks. On the morning of her burial, I drove alone to the cemetery in a rented black sedan, wearing the only black dress I owned, holding a single white lily I had bought from a gas station, because I hadn't thought far enough ahead to order flowers. I was 27 years old, completely alone, and utterly unprepared for what was about to happen. The general asterisk. The service lasted 11 minutes. A chaplain I had never met said a few words. 2 soldiers folded a flag with precise, practiced silence and handed it to me. I held it against my chest and stared at the mahogany casket being lowered into the earth, and I thought about how unfair it all was. How a woman who had given her youth, her health, and apparently her entire identity to her country was being buried with no fanfare, no recognition, no one watching except a grieving granddaughter and 3 military strangers. I was turning to leave when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, the kind of footsteps that carry authority. I turned around. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with silver hair and a uniform covered in more medals and ribbons than I had ever seen in person. 4 stars gleamed on each shoulder. His face was in his late 60s, deeply lined, the kind of face carved by decades of impossible decisions. He walked toward me with the kind of quiet command that didn't need an audience. He stopped 2 feet away, looked at me with dark, serious eyes, and extended his hand. I shook it automatically, too stunned to speak. "You're Sarah," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I managed. "Sarah Richard." "Eleanor's granddaughter." "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, glancing once at the grave, and something passed across his face, something old and heavy, like grief that had been carried so long it had become part of the bone. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I have ever known," he said quietly. "And I have known many brave people." My throat tightened. "I'm sorry, who are you?" He didn't answer that directly. Instead, he reached into the breast pocket of his uniform and withdrew a small white envelope, sealed, with nothing written on the outside. He held it out to me. "There are people in Geneva who have been waiting a very long time," he said. "Fly to Geneva. Go to the International Red Cross headquarters. Give them your grandmother's name at the front desk." I stared at the envelope. "I don't understand." You will. He pressed the envelope into my hand and closed my fingers around it. She protected something extraordinary, Sarah. For 50 years, she protected it at enormous personal cost. It's time for you to know what it was. He held my gaze for one more moment, steady, certain, carrying the weight of something I couldn't yet comprehend. And then he turned and walked away. I stood at my grandmother's grave, alone again, holding an unmarked envelope, with trembling hands and a heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The envelope. I sat in the rental car for 40 minutes before I opened it. Inside was a single index card. On it, written in my grandmother's handwriting, I recognized it instantly. The slanted cursive she had taught me herself were 7 words. Sarah, it was always for you. Ellie. That was all. I drove back to the hotel. I booked a flight to Geneva for the following morning. I didn't sleep. Geneva. The International Committee of the Red Cross headquarters sits in a stately building in Geneva, Switzerland, surrounded by quiet gardens and the kind of dignified silence that belongs to institutions older than most living memories. I walked through the front doors in the same black dress. I had packed almost nothing and approached the front desk with the index card clutched in my hand. The receptionist was a composed woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose. "Can I help you?" she asked in lightly accented English. Yes," I steadied my voice. "My name is Sarah Richard. My grandmother was Alina Richard. I was told to come here and give you her name." The woman's expression didn't change exactly, but something shifted behind her eyes. A kind of quiet recognition, like someone hearing a word they had been waiting to hear for a very long time. She picked up the phone, said 3 words in French I didn't catch. "Please sit down, Ms. Richard," she said. "Someone will be with you shortly." 12 minutes later, a door opened at the end of the hall. The room. The man who walked toward me was perhaps 70, lean and silver-haired, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather folder. He introduced himself only as Dr. Martle. He led me to a small, immaculate conference room, offered me water, which I accepted, and sat across from me with an expression of careful, respectful gravity. "Ms. Richard," he said, "what I am about to tell you has been sealed for 51 years. I gripped the water glass. "Okay. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, your government conducted a series of classified medical experiments on soldiers. Experiments that violated the Geneva Conventions in ways that, had they become public, would have caused an international crisis of the highest order." My mouth went dry. Several individuals within the U.S. military discovered what was happening and attempted to document and report it. They were systematically silenced. Records were destroyed. Careers were ended. 2 people died under circumstances that were never fully investigated. He paused. "Your grandmother was one of the nurses assigned to the program. She was 22 years old. She saw what was being done to those soldiers, and she made a decision that required more courage than most people will ever be called upon to demonstrate." He opened the leather folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was my grandmother, young, heartbreakingly young in her army nurse uniform, standing in what appeared to be a military hospital corridor. Her face was serious. Her eyes were the same eyes I had looked into my entire life, but they held something in that photograph I had never seen in person. They held fury. "Alina Richard spent 3 years secretly documenting everything," Dr. Martle said. "Medical records, photographs, witness statements. She smuggled the entire archive out of the facility hidden inside medical supply shipments. She then contacted the ICRC through back channels and surrendered the documents under a sealed agreement that protected her identity in exchange for her silence." I felt the room tilt slightly. The agreement stipulated that the archive would remain sealed until her death, at which point her identity could be disclosed and her role formally acknowledged. He met my eyes. "She gave up everything, Ms. Richard. Her military record was expunged as part of the arrangement, a condition the U.S. government insisted upon. Her veterans' benefits were quietly revoked. She received no compensation, no recognition, and no protection beyond the ICRC's promise to guard her identity. The tears came then. I didn't try to stop them. "She did it anyway," I whispered. "She did it anyway," he confirmed quietly. "Because 23 soldiers survived who would otherwise have died. Because she believed that what was being done to them was wrong, and that someone had to say so, even if that someone paid a price that was deeply, profoundly unfair." He slid another document across the table. "This is a formal letter of acknowledgement from the ICRC, recognizing Alina Richards' extraordinary service to humanitarian law. We have also coordinated with the Department of Defense, which has agreed, at last, to restore her military record, her honors, and her benefits posthumously." He paused. "And there is one more thing." He reached into the folder and withdrew a small velvet box. He placed it in front of me and opened it. Inside, on a bed of white satin, was a medal I didn't recognize, silver, engraved with the ICRC emblem on one side, and on the other, a single engraved line. "Alina Richard, in service of those who could not speak for themselves." I couldn't speak. I sat in that quiet Geneva conference room, holding my grandmother's medal in both hands, and I finally understood the weight of every silence she had ever kept. Every tired smile, every locked box, every time she had looked at me with those serious, loving eyes and said, "Some stories are too heavy for little ears, Sarah." She had been carrying this her entire life, alone, without recognition, without complaint, so that I could be safe, so that those 23 soldiers could live, so that someone, somewhere in some quiet room in Switzerland, could one day say her name out loud and call it what it was. Heroism. What I know now. I flew home with the medal in my carry-on bag, held against my chest for the entire 8-hour flight. I know now that my grandmother was not forgotten by everyone. The general who came to her grave, whose name I later learned but will not share here, had known her for 40 years, had known what she did, had carried his own version of that weight, waiting for the day he could look her granddaughter in the eye and begin to make it right. I know now that the locked box under her bed contained photographs of the soldiers, of the hospital, of the life she had lived in secret. I know now that she chose poverty over compromise, that she could have spoken, could have sold her story, could have demanded restitution at any point over 50 years. She never did. She just kept going, kept making cornbread, kept humming hymns, kept pressing wildflowers into the pages of her Bible, kept loving me with everything she had left after the war had taken what it took. My grandmother was an army nurse with no medals, no records, and no recognition. She was also the bravest person I have ever known. And now, finally, the world knows her name. Alina Richard. Say it, remember it. She earned that. If this story moved you, please share it. There are women like Alina in every generation, women who served, sacrificed, and were never thanked. Like and subscribe so stories like hers are never buried again. Drop a comment below. Did someone in your family serve in silence? Tell me their name. Let's remember them together.